This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you
You have located GeekFest Rants, the entertainment podcast for genre geeks like you.
Shall we play a game?
Covering the world of vintage and current film and television since 2010.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Featuring in-depth conversations on sci-fi, horror, fantasy, comics, toys, and conventions.
So say we all. So say we all.
And now sit back, relax, and enjoy today's show.
Take away his laser pistol, Lobot. You'll pay for this, Lando Calrissian.
Han Solo and other action figures each sold separately.
Ugnut, check the carbon freezing chamber. Ready, sir. Why did you do it? The Empire tricked me, Han. I had no choice. Prepare for freezing. Long live the Alliance. Goodbye, my friend.
Lando Calrissian and new Han Solo, Ugnaught, and Lobot action figures each sold separately from Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back collection from Kenner.
Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and today I have James joining us. We are going to hit the topic of customizable Star Wars action figures. I've talked about this in the past, some of the ones I've done, but ever since then, I've added quite a number to my collection, and James has actually started falling down that customizable rabbit hole that some of us appear to be living in lately. So he's going to tell us all about how he got started, what kind of figures he kind of wanted to start with, and we'll talk about all the different suppliers that are popping up here and there, and the stuff that we make ourselves. So let's get started with our custom Star Wars figures.
You can collect them all.
You are a toy!
Batteries not included.
Get those wonderful toys.
Details on specially marked packages at participating stores.
Is that the $6 Million Man's boss?
It's Oscar Goldman.
Why do you have that?
That's worth a lot of money. That's much more valuable than Steve Austin.
Action figures each sold separately.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end.
Some assembly required.
All your favorite Star Wars heroes and villains. I have 3 of each. 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
Well, as everybody knows, if they've been following some of our shows, from the past several years, specifically the COVID years, say 2019-20, give or take, I had done a lot of Lego purchases. And then I went down the rabbit hole of what many would call fake Legos. And I guess getting them from China and AliExpress and people on eBay who probably got them from AliExpress before I figured it out.
Yeah, and we did a show about that, I remember.
Yes, and I did many of my childhood favorites in Lego form, as well as some of the newer stuff. And I made the complete collection of Star Trek and various other Clone Wars and other Star Wars things that nobody ever made before or didn't make as well. And down the line, Buck Rogers, Battlestar, Emergency, everybody, Doctor Who, everybody heard that episode. And if they didn't, there's a link in the description, as the kids say. Okay, so I guess I was coming to the end of the internet in that realm, kiddingly, not knowing really what to get and not wanting to just settle on stuff. Like they started making things that were interesting, but not things that I would want to own, like E.T. or the A-Team. I just wasn't into those, but I wasn't finding things that could give me a day project or something like that if I had a day off or some time to kill. And then I think what happened earlier this year, I think while that was happening, I bought a book that had been out for a while called The Man Who Shot Luke Skywalker. And it's basically a book about the photography of the original Kenner stuff and the boxes and the promotion.
Which version of the book? Because he put out 3, like Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi.
Well, I got the Star Wars one because everything for me goes back to the original Star Wars from the early bird on. That's where I started. So I have such an affinity for that artwork and the logo and those cards with the Star Wars logo and the silver around the edges, like the typical Star Wars card. And then right after that, I guess I found a book because I had been listening to some YouTube videos with the designers and the engineers from Kenner. And there was a book about those guys and how they ramped up the projects and the wooden Millennium Falcon and the kit bashed figures and things like that. So I have a feeling it got my juices flowing. And next thing I know, I bought a custom Smith Lord Han Solo. I think you have them. And I think I was going to get one of yours because you were going to get two, and then they never sent it to you because of that whole debacle.
Yeah, the Fan Strike Back debacle, which we'll talk about a little later.
I found somebody carded, a custom carded Han and Stormtrooper, which is basically Luke and Stormtrooper with a Han head and everything else on the card. I said, well, this is great. Well, the internet must listen to me, or the phone must listen to me, because next I see, I guess, a classic land speeder with a box. And I've had a bee in my bonnet about the first 4 boxes from my first 4 toys that got thrown away. Everything else we've talked about, I have from the originals. But I didn't have those boxes anymore because the day after Christmas 1979, my father had me throw away the Millennium Falcon box and the X-Wing, TIE Fighter, and Land Speeder. Those 4 boxes wound up getting thrown away. And it bugged me, and it bugged me, and it bugged me. So I made an offer. I guess it was an offer. I made a ridiculously low offer for the Land Speeder box because basically I just wanted the box, and it came with a Land Speeder that wasn't perfect, and it didn't bother me that it wasn't perfect. But it was pretty good. It was all complete and everything. It just was used. And it turns out I got it. And I got the box. I was very excited. And, well, holding that box made me feel like a kid again. And also, like I said, the phone listens to me, and it kept, when I'd look at eBay, it'd send me down the rabbit hole. And then I made some offers to things, and I found ultimately an AT-AT, and I didn't have an AT-AT. We were poor. No, I had every toy. I couldn't afford the AT-AT because it was $50 at the time. The Millennium Falcon was $30. $50 in was it $80, $81? Was a lot of money at the time. It probably was the equivalent of $150, give or take. And my father said, well, you can have this, but we can't get all these other toys. And I said, well, let me have all the other toys. I just won't get the AT-AT. A friend of mine had it. Eventually, I'll get the AT-AT. Eventually, I'll get the AT-AT. And, and then they moved on and I didn't have the AT-AT. I also, and you did a show on this, I didn't have IG-88 and a couple of the large size figures. And I said, oh, look, there's a Ben Kenobi. It's like perfect. Didn't have his lightsaber. So I wound up getting, for a really nice price, Ben Kenobi, C-3PO, Jawa, and a Stormtrooper. And the Stormtrooper was ridiculously cheap because he had yellow on it, which I see has been a problem. Well, I also saw how people fixed it. And I said, well, I'm going to try that with that pasty bleach type of stuff that you use for your hair. So I got it, put the bleach on it, because the Stormtrooper is pretty much all white. And it said that it wouldn't affect the paint on the black parts.
Oh, good.
And it was clean otherwise. I did it, put it in front of the window for 2 days, flipped it over for 2 days. And next thing I know, I have a white Stormtrooper, as beautiful as it could be. Everything else was great. And I bought some guns from a guy on eBay. And I don't care. These are not people. I'm not trying to sell these. I'm not trying to get into a fight with anybody, trying to prove that I have the greatest collection. I just figured at some point I would take a picture of all of them and they'd have these guns. And what's the difference? Why would I spend $1,000 on a collection of guns when I could get them for however much this guy was selling them for? And he was a nice guy and he had fast service. So I got it. Well, again, the internet was listening. And the only one I didn't have was IG-88. And I said, well, let me see. And a guy in Canada had a nice unbroken. And so I think you discussed it on a show or whatever, or you have it or something, that sometimes finding IG-88 with his parts complete and not damaged is difficult.
Not only that, but it's just like everything else. The accessories sometimes are worth more than the actual figure, the actual doll.
I soon found that out. If you wanted one with the real guns and bandolier with the little bombs, it was going to be many hundreds to thousands of dollars. But this IG-88 was perfect, and I made an offer, and the guy accepted, and I said, you know what, it's worth the extra money. And I did it. And I got the custom guns. They're exact the way it was. The only thing my IG-88 doesn't have is his bandolier with those little bombs stick into the bandolier. And I don't care because I'm the only one who's going to see it. And I'm never selling them. And nobody's trying to buy them. And nobody cares what I have. So I figured, you know what? And I've recently found a guy selling the bandolier. If you can believe this, the high bid at the moment is like $340.
What?
So it's probably going to end up in the 4s or 5s, low 5s when it's over. And there's no way it's worth sending.
That's what I mean. It's just nuts with trying to find these pieces.
So why would I pass up having the very clean and in great shape toy that's 45 years old just because there's no bandolier? Oh, no, I'm going to hold out for the bandolier. Well, if I hold out for the bandolier, why don't I hold out for the box too and spend $3,000? Like, what am I, an idiot? Nobody's that stupid. Well, maybe some people are, but
yeah,
that's their choice. So now I have the large size figures. Now I have the AT-AT, and where do you think I go next?
Well, hold on. Before you jump to your next rabbit hole, let me tell you a little bit about my 12-inch rabbit hole. Just like you, I've never really collected the 12-inch figures when they first came out. I was a 3 3/4-inch person, period. That's it. But
man's got to know his limitations.
I know. But I would say something in, I don't know, maybe sometime in the 90s when they rebooted the late 90s, when they started rebooting Star Wars, and they started putting out the Hasbro versions of the 12-inch figures that were obviously much more detailed, than the original Kenner ones. I started collecting, I think, and I don't know why, don't ask me why, but I started collecting any form of Stormtrooper-looking large size figure. So, the TIE Fighter pilot, the Snowtrooper,
cool.
Anything like that. And in that mix, I also started collecting droids. Now, again, I'm talking about the more modern versions. So,
I remember.
IG-88, some of the Bounty Hunter droids, anything that was droid related. And then once I had all these Stormtrooper-looking things and droid-looking things, I was like, you know what? It'd be nice to compare the old C-3PO and the old R2 12-inch to the new ones to see, the progression of how they changed. And that's when I got my first original Kenner C-3PO and R2. And at the time, I believe I ended up having to order the Death Star plans separate because the specific one I picked did not have them included inside.
He didn't have the 2 slide-in ones.
Exactly. And that was always a little like, I always forget that there's some additional feature in there that you can play with. So
now, do you recall, I'm sure you recall because you could look at it when you want.
I'm looking at it right now.
The paint, they say the paint, I know now, I did so much research, but they would say, I had the R2, no problem, my R2's fine, but when kids touched it too much, sometimes the silver, the chrome on the head would rub off or would be chipped away or damaged.
No.
And the C-3PO would sometimes have some paint issues, I guess, because it was that gold, the gold, chromy kind of gold. Yeah. How are yours? Were yours good? Because I know there's a big difference in price between those.
Oh, definitely. Well, when I look at mine, and I remember even back then that my only concern was that, and this is something that you're probably used to too, especially with your Stormtrooper, was that some of the seams on the R2, the white parts, there was slight yellowing in the seams, almost like an orangey brown yellowing. It's beyond yellow.
And you can fix that the same way as the Stormtrooper if you popped off that process of using the pasty bleach does work on anything white. And I think they just said don't put it on stuff that's articulately painted. Like you wouldn't want to put it on the chrome probably.
Yeah, that will probably destroy it.
You might have to unscrew it if you wanted to fix it someday, but you can do it with anything white.
Yeah, my chrome is in pretty good shape. I mean, obviously it's got scratches. It's been played with. Same thing with C-3PO. It's not mint, but it looks like it's something I had for 40 years. You know what I mean?
That's my criteria. That was my criteria for mine. And my C-3PO that I just got is beautiful. I can't believe, I guess people sometimes are just not into it, or they acquire them, or they're selling them for other people who didn't have them or want them anymore. That's what was so magical about this. The Ben Kenobi, he wasn't stripped. He had his undercloak was white. His top cloak was nice and cleaned. It didn't have sticky stuff or some weird stuff on it. The Jawa had his proper bandolier. The IG-88 fingers and pointy parts were not broken off, and that's what was nice about it.
Oh, yeah. And that kind of stopped everything for me right there with the 12-inch line. I didn't go any further at that time. Fast forward to, I don't know, let's say maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I would say, because I think I was already here in Florida, and I started to kind of focus more on the vintage, and I was already kind of catching up to my 3 3/4 figures, ships, play sets, all that stuff. And I was like, you know what? It would be nice to get maybe one or two. And sticking to my original plan of not people, just droids and creature, weird looking things. So that's when I started picking up, the Stormtrooper, the Boba Fett, the Vader, let's see, Jawa, Chewbacca, and IG-88. And again, all of these were secondhand, missing some accessories here or there. And I even picked up, because I was in that mindset at the time, a 12-inch Indiana Jones.
Very nice.
Which surprised the crap out of me because it wasn't listed on the listing that it had the gun included. And that is one of those items. And again, you might pay more for the accessory than the toy. The only thing it didn't have was the hat. But I absolutely hated that hat anyway.
That hat it's the worst.
I would never have, even if they came with the hat, I would not display it with that hat. It was awful. I hated it. And as you probably know, the mold is the Han Solo mold. So now I have basically all of the creatures and robots, but I don't have any of the humans. And that's something that I might have to kind of get around to getting those last 4 humans, the Ben.
Yep. And you have IG-88.
Yes.
You found an original IG-88?
Yep, an original
Very
IG-88
nice.
without the band. What I could do is I could go to my modern IG-88 and steal the bandolier and steal some of those weapons.
I think it looks very similar. I think the bombs are just more brown or black or something to make them less fake, like the red ones when the Kenner ones were red.
Yeah, the unfortunately the human characters, they have so much more clothing and accessories that it's if you want something that has most of even the clothing, it's going to be a little more expensive than just a Stormtrooper, or a C-3PO.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing about this. It was a slippery slope, and did I need them? No. But at the same time, while this was happening, I decided to go into my storage and sell some Legos. And I sold basically some of the older Star Wars ones that, while many people wanted them and liked them, that's obviously why I tried to sell them, they were the original ones like from Phantom Menace and some of the Attack of the Clones and stuff like that. And also my Pirates of the Caribbean stuff, which are very valuable and very desired. So I wound up selling, but basically I sold 20 items that I made $6,000. And I'm not saying it to be like, bragging, but it was a shock that I made that kind of money because I figured it sometimes, I'm going to have to just give this stuff away because it's going to cost more to sell. But I was pleasantly surprised. And this was basically, like I said, 20 items between Star Wars and Pirates of the Caribbean, and no hard effort over about a 3-month period. And that I justified as paying for my large size figures. And then after that large size figure, a magical ray of light came to me. And I happened to find an AT-AT.
Oh boy.
Now, the AT-AT is legendary for having broken pieces, missing shin guns, faded parts. And this was somebody who was not selling as a Star Wars collector or fan. They were selling, that's something they acquired either from somebody or whatever, I don't know how, but they wound up being a very nice person. I communicated with them, made an offer. The offer was a little low for them. They said they'd let me know, but I thought about it and I said, you know what, let's see. And we talked a little bit more, and they came up, I came down, however you want to talk about the negotiation, and I got it with free shipping, which was ridiculous because it's such a big box and it was so well packed. And I felt like a kid because I did not have the AT-AT.
Quick question: was it shipped assembled or were the legs removed?
I feel like the legs might have been removed, because I did have to pop something in it. I did it very tentatively at first.
That sounds like the legs, because when I got mine a couple years ago, same thing. When they shipped it, the legs were removed, and I completely forgot. And I think, if I could be wrong, but do you remember if the original box was assembled, or did we also pop the legs in ourselves?
I think you had to pop the legs in. I think in the box, it's sitting there on like a hump, and the legs are on the side of it in like little plastic baggies or something.
Yep.
And then you had to pop on. So I had to pop on the side guns, the chin guns, the legs, and everything else was connected and fine. There was no issue.
Chin guns are those very expensive items that sometimes cost more than the toy.
Yep. And I had done some research, and I looked, and I knew And it was a nice experience. It was very, very nice. I was very excited. And then I tried to assemble a whole group of Hoth characters. I got some Tauntauns. I basically...
Down the rabbit hole you went.
I got everything from Hoth. I got some beaters, what would be considered beaters from people. I think if you're new and young and you don't know the figures, I know these figures. I know what they're supposed to have. I remember buying mine in the store. I can remember, on most of my figures, I can remember the day I got them and how I got them and what store I got them from. It's ridiculous, I know, to say that. But I knew what guns they were supposed to have. I knew if they were where the rubbing would happen on certain figures, like if the hair rubbed or something. But I got them. And then some guy was selling a slightly dirty turret probot playset. I said, oh, what would be nice for this Hoth set would be a turret.
Of course.
and the probot. And then somebody I found on eBay had a clear stand to make, if you weren't putting it on the turret probot playset, they would put a separate stand if you wanted to put it on a shelf. So it looked like it was hovering. And it was like $10. And I said, oh, I'm going to get that.
And then somebody texted you, hey, you don't have the little radar dish that the rebels are shooting on.
And then the next day I did. And I found a guy, and he had it. It was no damage. And actually, it was a very nice guy. And I bought a second thing from him just recently. So I got a Wampa. Or sometimes I bought some things, and it came with some other things. Oh. And so, I think a Wampa came with somebody else. I'm like, well, this is really coming together nicely. And then I wound up saying, well, you know what? Okay, I'll get a sensor scope R2. I have to find the right one because they could be expensive. And you don't want them to be too clean because they're expensive. You don't want them to be too dirty because then it's like, But I had it all nice. And I got a C-3PO. And then I got the Scout Walker. Yep. My Scout Walker is in the box still and never been opened. And, I got a Scout Walker, and then I'm like, I got to get a Scout Walker driver. Even though it wasn't an Empire character, it was a Jedi character. I imagine the same guy probably just drove the Scout Walker on Hoth, and he just happened to wear a jacket maybe. So I used the same Scout Walker, and then I had to get 21B and FX7. So everything is kind of like symmetrical back and forth. I have the Luke. I had originally a Luke X-Wing underneath with a lightsaber, but then I got a loose Luke, a Snowspeeder Luke from the retro collection, so he looks more appropriate. I'm gonna do a little project. We're gonna get to that. I'll get down the line. We'll talk about that.
Now let's keep in mind that other than the AT-AT, you already own these things in the bunker. They're in the bunker.
Yeah, the originals are all with their original guns, with their original accessories in the carrying case. The ones that were opened in the carrying case, the ones that have never been opened are still in their original card in a Kenner shipping box. Yeah, so this was all house money with my eBay sales and, again, beaters. I wasn't looking for ones that would do perfect, and some of them didn't come with guns. And then I found, and this is going to be blasphemy, these are not my collectibles. These are the display for my AT-AT Hoth display because I was a weird kid and never got to play with my toys. And then I got some guns from Stan Solo and some other people who made guns. And these are not for sale or resale or recard or anything. These are for just to hang out on the windowsill with their pals until I get bored. Probably. And the last thing with my little display is that somebody, I wonder who, said, oh, you should get snow for it. And I ordered from Amazon Christmas snow from under your Christmas tree in strips rather than the round one. So I haven't put the snow down there yet. Maybe I'm going to do it soon.
Well, for the holidays coming up.
For the holidays, and it'll be good. But I can't stay there forever. Like right now, the AT-AT cannot stay on the windowsill and stuff because it'll fade. But that's where everybody is they're lined up on my windowsill, looking at the view, and it's just some fun. Just some fun that I never could have for various reasons, whether it was the way I collected or just I didn't play with my toys. So then that goes to the next phase of our
just when you thought you were done
Star Wars. Then I have, and this is something that I wouldn't say you're responsible, but you had poked me from time to time. You are a customizer. You have bought figures, beaters, whatever you would call them, and sometimes you've tried to do head swaps and paint jobs and stuff, and you have a show on that, and it's a very nice collection. You've made some stuff, and I'm afraid to do painting. I've done painting as a kid, as models, but I really don't want to go down that hole. But I thought, well, you can. I've seen some videos, and you can do some easy head swaps, and you can make a X-wing pilot with Farm Boy head. And then you can do some other things like a Han Solo Hoth with a Bespin Han head.
Yeah, that's the basics. That's the starting point for customizing those basic ones.
And I'm going to talk about the ethics of this after I bring this up. But then I saw the easiest swap is the one that we want the most. And that is a final dual Luke. And you can swap. You pop off the Endor speeder bike Luke. You pop off his helmeted head, which is the stupidest thing because Leia has a pop-off helmet and Bouche has a pop-off helmet and Stormtrooper Luke. But why did they mold the head? And probably just because they were getting to the end and maybe they were lazy. I don't know. And we may never know, but I think you'll agree that was the dumbest thing not to have a pop-off helmet Luke.
I think the possibility is that Leia's head is smaller, so she doesn't look out of proportion, but Luke's head would have to been shrunken down, and it might have looked a little too much like the...
like he was wielding a football helmet.
The small head Han, like tiny head Han.
So anyway, that one I said, you know what? I never opened any of those figures, so I never even touched them. I didn't know what it looked like underneath other than what you and some internet people said. But I found one without the poncho and his, decent body. And they said, the joints are nice and everything. And you have to pay a little bit more for that. But believe it or not, when he doesn't have his poncho, he's not that expensive. But the body is the Luke from the final battle with no Jedi tunic robes over him and none of that kind of stuff. So I gave it a shot. Instead of buying a Tatooine Luke, Jabba's Palace Luke, I bought the Retro Collection Luke, and they were $11 on Amazon. Very cheap from Hasbro. I said, you know what? This is an experiment. If I wreck it, it only cost me $11, and I probably won't wreck the Luke. I'll just pop his head back on and see what I can do. But if I don't wreck it, it's going to be a fun little thing. And I did it. Carlos, it was so simple. I did it in like 5 or 6 minutes. Put them in the water, pop off the heads, pop the heads back on, and blam, it was that fun and simple, and I was shocked. And I had purchased, I didn't even purchase. The green lightsaber comes with the Jabba Luke, the retro Luke. So I popped because he doesn't need a gun on the Death Star. He has his green lightsaber, and I now had a final dual Luke that I didn't have before. And it was very satisfying that I did it on my own. And then I wound up buying...
Well, hold on. When I made mine, which I did it a long time ago, they didn't have the retro line at that point. So I had to
bought a beater probably,
I had to buy a beater and take this head off. And the only thing
by beater, I want everybody to know when I say beater, these aren't crapped up figures. No. I'm just calling them beaters because
they're just not perfect.
For $10. Yeah. They're anywhere from $10 to $20 depending on
how rare they are. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to pay a little more for the rare ones. But anyway, what I did to mine is the same thing with you. You know, the body and the head, boom, put them together. But what I also added to mine was a little white triangle to the front of the shirt, so you have that flap, that post-dual flap on Luke.
Yep. And I had considered that, but I didn't need it. I kind of tried to keep it looking nice because I was going to recard mine with a custom card that I'll get into that in a couple minutes. I found a complete... It's from Australia, and at this very second, I can't remember if it's a repro or if it's a original one with a belt. And originally it came with a not a lightsaber, ironically. I think it originally came with the belt, the tannish poncho with the hood, and the Jabba's Palace gun, one of those, the same weird guns. But in the meantime, I had acquired a Endor Leia with the helmet, with the cloak, with the belt, and the gun, very cheap. And again, this was because once you're on the internet and things just pop up and suggestions, and if you looked at something, somebody will contact you and make an offer. If they'll offer you a price, maybe they're trying to move it. And again, it's used, but it's not damaged or anything. And I got a Han. Apparently some characters that you'd think would be expensive are not. And I got a Han with his Endor cape. And I thought maybe I got a good price. And I thought, well, maybe somebody fooled me because it was another one I never touched before. So I didn't know. But I thought, well, maybe somebody fooled me because there was a retro one. And I would have been happy with the retro one just to put the three together. But it wound up being everything's real on him. And I had a Han Solo gun from the guns that I purchased. And now the three of them are beautifully displayed next to a wicket. I got a retro wicket, And the only thing is, if you looked under the skirt of the Endor, the speeder bike Endor Luke, he's the Luke body from Jabba's palace, and nobody will be the wiser because I'm not selling it, I'm not scamming anybody, but it's such a simple thing. And if I put it on eBay and I told somebody, hey, this is a custom, they might be so thrilled themselves, because that's one of those figures that you cannot get cheaply with all its components.
Exactly.
And some people are not like yourself, and for my display purposes, I'm not upset about having customized weapons or repro weapons or something. For my real collection, again, that's no man's land. I'm not touching any of them. They're still in their cards. They're still packaged. Which leads me to the next level of hell. The customs from the Stan Solos, Next 17s.
Yeah, the professional customs, yeah.
The professional modern customs that everybody has been going gaga about for the past couple years. And for me, I found some fantastic, really nice people on Etsy who have made cards with the bubbles and the footers and things that would come with them, and have helped me when I made suggestions. They made customs for me of things that they didn't initially offer, because maybe they try to just do the ones that are official cards, but now some of these guys will print their own, and they're so well done and they're so nice. Now, again, these are not to fool anybody. You can tell by I think you can tell by the slickness of some of the cards. The Kenner cards would have had a sheen on them that was a little bit matte, or, not quite shiny when you got them in the stores. Some of these are being printed in a modern style that they sometimes are smooth with a little bit of a gloss to it. Not like a fancy gloss, shiny gloss, but you can just tell the difference. And again, if you're trying to fool somebody, I think you're a jerk. If you're doing it for what I'm doing it, because I just love the carded aspect of the style, having it carded in my hand for a lot of these that were, these customs, I've been trying to basically acquire what I have not gotten from Stan Solo, which are basically, now I feel like I've got everything except all those droids that you have. But, I got a Boba Fett, and I got a Slave Leia, and I got the Garandin, and I got the Ula. So, we've done shows on that too, how fantastic those are. Those are really, and let me say, if you're even listening to this and you've had a question about buying from Stan Solo, run to your computer and buy, because they are so well done. And in addition to the ones that are brand new that they never made, they make and sell some of the harder to find ones if you're not such a stickler to get some of the older ones that you could never. I think Yak Faces, I'm sure they're not all still available, but they are on the internet, and perhaps you could still get them.
Well, some of these companies went away. Some companies don't exist anymore. But right now, I think you have at least, I would say 4 or 5, maybe even 6 companies that are cranking out stuff in different amounts, let's say, or different quantities or qualities.
I would say Stan Solo is the best. That's probably the top of the mountain, as best that they can get. You just got your Tanaka sisters that are fantastic from what you tell me. I'm hoping for mine to come soon.
And just to clear the air, which I will be talking about this on a separate episode, we're talking about quality here. We're not talking about customer service. We're not talking about any of the other stuff that I will talk about, during a different show. We're talking about the product. How is that product compared to other products, or compared to even original Kenner? That's what we're talking about.
I'll order the Stan Solo usually while I'm working on a Saturday or Sunday, and I'll have it 2 days later. That's how fast the shipping is these days on stuff that's in stock. Obviously, when you're pre-ordering, well, I guess we're at the mercy of the manufacturing
Not only
process,
that, but sometimes you're at the mercy of, because some of these come from England, some of them come from other countries in Europe.
Wherever.
So it's good when you have somebody who's got their factory or whatever it is, their supply in the U.S., like Funky McClunky, for example. They have everything here, so shipping is super cheap. You're paying $4 or $5 for shipping, as opposed to, $15, $20, $30 just for the shipping alone.
That is something on a couple of them, that the shipping was surprising. So the Next 17 made a lot of Cantina guys and a couple of Jabba Palace guys. I got you. Was it a Hermie Oodle? Was that his name? Was it it was like a large, bulky guy. I got from you. And I'm like, well, some of them were, when they first came out, over $50 each. And it's like, well, That's a lot of money. And there were like 6 or 8 Cantina creatures plus an Uncle Owen plus a
that was next
Boy
17.
Luke.
That was next 17.
Yeah. And I couldn't justify spending $300 for these figures, and I wasn't quite sure about them. So, I kicked the can down the road. And then there was another company, I feel like it's been several years. I bought you a kit-bashed Boba Fett with the rocket launcher, the one that looks like he's from the picture of what we were thinking we were supposed to get in the old days, when in reality we got the Boba Fett that everybody knows. The Kenner Boba Fett.
That might have been, I'm not entirely sure, but that might have been Pro Customs.
That's Pro Customs. And they have gone into a whole line of figures. They have X-Wing pilots, custom X-Wing pilots. You got them, and then I talked myself into getting the Yavin Ceremony, Leia, Han, and Luke. They do the droids and Ewoks figures, which are almost ridiculously hard to get, and those are not my cup of tea. That, to me, that's a different set of toys. I don't know if you've bought any by accident or on purpose, but I do not go down that hole of the droids. I think I would have liked and should have gotten, when Stan Solo made them, the droids version of R2 and 3PO, but I didn't, and they're very expensive now for anybody who has them. And since droids was after my time, because I was practically an adult when droids and Ewoks were on, so that's not something I have to feel like I need to have. And then there's 1 or 2 people who've done their own. Well, we've talked about how the Smith Lords had a few danglers that were out, the Blue Snaggletooth and the Han Solo. And am I forgetting any other companies? There was Funky McClunky, you said. And
Trash Compactor.
Trash Compactor is a really nice one. And then I found a couple people who just did some custom paint jobs, which is like what you've done for some of your figures. And they are super nice people who have a lot of talent. And I have recently acquired for the 2 of us, one each of the Cantina Band figure. Now, we could have gone crazy, I guess, but they were about $50 each, and we could have gotten crazy and bought all 7 of the Cantina Band. And I don't know if I'm or you're in that kind of boat, but we're each going to have a representation of the Cantina Band by this guy. Do you know the name? Is it Iron Claw or something? That it's very famous customizer and has made many, and that's where I've gotten some idea how to make the X-Wing pilot. Oh, and I even was able to find a Doros from somebody who was doing home customs. This was not one of these bigger mass producer guys. I think this was a guy who had some parts and decided to give it a try, and I'm glad I found it, because the Doros from the Cantina is so nice and so well done. And anyway, I have so far down this rabbit hole that we keep talking about that I'm not sure I can ever come back up, because finally, the last things that I've gotten were the other 3 boxes that I allowed my father to get rid of from the very earliest days. I have gotten an X-Wing, a TIE Fighter, and a Millennium Falcon. And I just got the Empire version of the Millennium Falcon box, all real, from 45 years ago, give or take, in a condition that is age appropriate, but not completely destroyed and ruined and anything like that. And the final last thing of this, I think, of this era, the whole recard and reacquire and re-everything era of this year, we both separately bought the Hasbro TIE Bomber. And for my TIE Bomber, I just ordered a Kenner-style box to put it in. So it will live happily looking like a Kenner toy, because according to Retroblasting and Toy Polloi, or whoever these people are, have said this Hasbro TIE Bomber is as good as Kenner would have made, and it's in that style. So I think that's what led both of us to pull that trigger. Would you agree? Oh,
yeah, definitely. It's one of those things that I'm actually surprised that no customizer has made one, in the Kenner style, because granted, it is difficult to make those larger things. I mean, it's one thing is figures. Yeah. The other thing is, like the Bantha, for example, when they try to do something a little bigger, obviously it's going to cost a lot more. And who knows how sketchy the people making it are in terms of whether or not they can deliver. But yeah, if it would be great if somebody took a crack. I'm sure somebody might have done it from themselves. They've actually, paced together. And it's funny because I was thinking about are there any other ships that, were never manufactured, from the original trilogy at least? And the only thing I can think of is the fact that in Empire, I believe, there's actually 2 versions. One is the bomber and one is the shuttle transport that Vader takes from one ship to the other, which is kind of like the bomber, except they inverted at the wings, I think.
Oh, okay. I do know what you're talking about, but I don't know if I've ever seen it so close to know how different or what it is. Because in the special edition, they changed that, and I think they turned that, maybe I'm wrong, depending on the scene, but they turned that into a Tidarium, which I always thought was, now in the Clone Wars and all these things, those Tidarium style have been in service. But since we never really saw it before Jedi, I assume that was like a newer, Mark 10 version, the newest for the Emperor, for, Vader and the higher end people. But as we've seen, there's been those folding wing shuttles as far back as Clone Wars and Rogue One and stuff. So I guess it depends on what you're willing to add into your Kenner collection for, the modern stuff, because there is a lot of nice modern stuff that does have a good aesthetic. People who want, for instance, the A-Wing. The A-Wing is very expensive, or the skiff. The skiff
That's what I did.
Very expensive.
That's exactly what I did.
Buy the original Hasbro version that has the same features with just a little bit of nicer paint job, more wear appropriate in, like the engine wear and stuff, or, paint wear. And that's just as nice if that's what you're in for, because it's the same mold, and that nobody should be overpaying if they're just putting it on display in their personal collection. Again, if you're trying to scam somebody and put it in a box and say, oh, it's original, I guess that's pretty crappy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's going to be a nice TIE bomber, which I absolutely didn't need, but I got a mint in the box one, substantially cheaper than what a lot of the loose ones are going for, just because of luck, because somebody was nice and accepted my offer or made a nice counter offer. And that's what I've done. I've made some nice connections, not friends. I'm not going to hang out with them, but I've communicated with them well enough to know they're decent sellers, because if you make a low offer, they can get out of here. But sometimes they're like, well, all right, if you're willing, I'll sell it cheaper if you're willing to, go $10 higher than that. And it's like, well, that shows me, that's goodwill. And when I was selling mine, I would accept that. I would understand that too, because when people do budge, you understand they're not selling gold. We're talking about old toys.
Mm-hmm.
If they're in those plexi boxes, not plexi, what do they call those? If they're in those acrylic boxes,
the acrylics,
mint, and they're many thousands of dollars,
and graded and everything,
Yeah, I understand you have a lot of demand because you only have one of those. There's so few of those perfect specimens. But these other ones, it's like there's about 10 of everything, and I would like to get the best one that I can afford, but I also am not trying to get the ones that are so ridiculously good that it looks like an eyesore if I were to ever display my thing, where everything is like, people would just say, oh, that must be fake because it's too nice. Carlos, breaking news.
Okay, what do we got?
Beep. Since we recorded the discussion about large size figures and things of that nature, my phone must have been listening to me, because later that night on the day of the recording, I happened to look, and we have discussed the large size IG-88 and how the sum of his parts are more expensive than him. Well, I had discussed people were looking at mid 3s, 4s, 5s even.
Oh my God.
For an original large size IG-88 bandolier with bombs.
Ugh.
And now whatever it is that thing is made of has made it rare and made it so hard to find, because most people are trying to either reconstitute it so they can make a $200 IG-88 $700 by having the proper bandolier or guns or whatever. Well, anyway, something popped up on my eBay, and somebody, a very nice, polite person, wanted $350 for it. And that was about the going price for the cheapest bandolier. And I said to you yesterday, that is crazy. Nobody would pay that. Well, I don't know if there was a make offer on it or however it was. And I said, well, let me just see. And I offered $200. Now, to the uninitiated, that still sounds like a lot of money, but there's no way anybody's going to get one that cheap. And I got lucky, and they accepted it. Now, again, the bird in the hand is better than the one that's hiding over in the bush. And you're probably saying, this is ridiculous. What an idiot. But I know getting it.
Oh boy.
I know once I have it, if I just turn it around, I could probably make $100 on it without any effort. But I'm not going to do that obviously because I want it, and obviously out of respect to the guy who gave me a bargain. And so hopefully very soon it will appear, probably by the time these shows post, on my IG-88, and he will be able to show up in polite society wearing his proper attire.
Oh my goodness. That thing's going to be worth more than everything else you own.
So I will have a large size IG-88 that I got pretty cheap. I will have the bandolier that I got very cheap, and I will have his 2 guns, which I am fair to say that those are repros, but I think he will look very nice if ever displayed outside of the vault.
Wow. Well, that's, we knew that was out there. We knew it could happen, so... Man, I'm surprised somebody's not making them from scratch.
Those repro saddles or bridles for the dewback and the tauntauns and some of these other creatures are out there. And again, belts and ponchos, sometimes people are able to mimic those and sell those. I am shocked, and I've looked, that nobody made a custom, and they could still charge $100 for a custom because they'd be the only guys who did it, or just be everybody would want one, so they could charge more for it. I'm surprised they didn't. There's nobody. It doesn't seem to exist.
All right, I hope everybody enjoyed today's show. I'd like to thank James for joining me today. We are going to actually continue this conversation on a couple of future episodes because there is lots and lots more that we want to tell you about when we start to kind of drill down on specific companies and what they specialize at, and talk about the quality. This is a mostly quality episode, the quality discussion for how these figures are made and who seems to have, some of these best offerings. The type of stuff that we talked about so many times before, that is that Kenner, or in this particular case, Hasbro, doesn't seem to be taking advantage of. They've entered the retro line, if you will, world of figures, but they are going very, very little on original figures that we wanted. There's a few out there, but instead they seem to be focusing more on the style that we like being applied to new properties. So that's a whole other dynamic that we'll have to hit at one point. But anyway, once again, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you soon here at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
It's Darth Vader! Watch out! And he's got a lightsaber!
It's Kenner's Star Wars action figures, each sold separately.
I got you now, Ben Kenobi!
With R2-D2 and C-3PO. There's even Chewbacca and Han Solo.
Someone's coming, Chewie. Who's there? It's Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker. Now I know the Force is with us.
Darth Vader, R2-D2, C-3PO, and other Kenner Star Wars action figures, each sold separately.
If you would like to subscribe to our show, send us messages, or see video links to some of the topics we talked about today, please visit our homepage at geekfestrants.com or our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or iTunes at GeekFest Rants.
I don't know what we're yelling about!
GeekFest Rants is produced by Carlos Perone, copyright 2024.
This broadcast is part of the IC Robots Radio Network. Visit icrobots.com for this and many other nerd/nostalgia related podcasts. You won't be sorry for long.